Okay, I'm going to attempt a Cotaco Creek projectile point on this video. I took some notes some days ago and I got some basic measurements. The overall length I've got here is 64, so I'm going to count that like 65 by 40 as the basic length to width. So I've got plenty of length, I think. Well, it's close. Yeah, it's close because it's kind of dicey up in this area. Okay, and then the stem is about 1 centimeter long and 1.5 centimeters wide. Okay. Now, I looked it up just before the video, but I didn't really get all the information on it. If I mess it up, I'll do a video where I make corrections. Okay. So with that loss, I'm kind of probably going to be a little bit short. But it shouldn't be too bad. Yeah. I had a feeling that was going to happen, but I can't be shy with it. And I will narrate this one. Just because I do get more requests to narrate. I get more requests to narrate than I do to shut up. So there you go. So yeah, all my points. Lately I've been using an iron indirect percussion flaker with a plastic mallet. But I could be using other tools and stuff. I just prefer to use something that doesn't wear down very fast. I can make hundreds of points with this kind of stuff without worrying about maintenance. I'm sure I can make plenty of points with this particular bopper without worrying about it, unless I switch over to completely raw material. What that means for you just tuning in, raw is unheat treated or non-heat treated chert, flint, or whatever I'm knapping. Now there are stones that do not respond to heat treatment, and I just saw a revised list. Everybody knows, I think, that Obsidian does not respond to heat treatment. You've got to heat that stuff well over 600 degrees. I think it's well over 1,000 degrees to make it, or to affect it in any way. So Dover Chert is something else that cannot be heat treated. Rhyolite, everybody I think knows Rhyolite cannot be. I think there is a type of Hornstone. I don't know. I need to look it up. I'll put it in the description. Sorry about that. I already forgot the revised list, but I didn't mention Dover Chert. I think Onondaga Chert from New York is not heat treatable. But like I said, I'll put it in the description. What cannot be heat treated, just in case you guys are just about to put a big load of Rhyolite into the turkey roaster or something like that. Don't do it. Now, some of you guys don't know what you have, so it's okay. it's not going to hurt the stone if you heat treat it. Rhyolite's pretty indestructible no matter what you do. But some materials will become destroyed if you heat treat it. A lot of darker agates and cherts and flints are very sensitive to heat, and they will crack and break up even under extremely low heat. As far as heat treating goes, they may explode and crack and break up at 300 degrees or even lower, 280. Once you get past 270 degrees, it starts to affect the stone, and some stones can't go much higher than 275 degrees. I know there's some of those in Texas. Those are mainly the dark brown cherts and flints, what we call root beer around here. Some of those don't need heat treatment at all. And if you do put them in the turkey roaster, they will explode or crack or become crazed, which means that they are full of fractures. They might not explode, but they will be full of fractures on the interior. Okay. Like this is a heat-treated piece of Buffalo Creek, right? My spalls are getting smaller and smaller, so my points that I'm doing or demonstrating are also getting smaller and smaller. The Cotaco Creek is one of those that's kind of a medium-sized point. I'm already shorter than the notes that I took. My point's going to be less than 65. What is it? 65 millimeters. Yeah. I may have been luckier with the base here if I had not been narrating, but I don't know, it may have had an internal flaw. I lost a lot of the base and lost a lot of the tip early on. For you that are new, you might ask, how do I know how much to grind the edges? Well, I don't really know until I start trying to remove flakes. And if it's not working with a little bit of grinding, which is the default, grind a little bit and try it out, then you grind more the next time. And if it still doesn't work, you just grind more the next time. It's trial and error, mainly. Well, next question is, how do you get long flakes like this to go across and thin it out? How do you do that? Is there a formula? Is there a specific angle? Is there a specific amount of force? Is there a mathematical calculation? Is there a flake path, a flake trajectory? Is it all fracture mechanics? Can it be analyzed down to the minute forces? Can we track the forces? Can we display the forces? Can we draw them out? Can you show this in words? The answer to all those is yes, but you don't want to go through all that stuff. You don't ask about the trajectories in physics when you're trying to learn to play baseball or something, right? Flintknapping is basically a sport. You can learn the numbers and the physics, but until you actually go out and practice, it's really pretty useless. And there's a lot of risk. It's very similar to a sport because there's risk involved. There is muscle memory. There's repetition required. I considered it more of a fight than a construction activity. I'm fighting with the stone, so I use terminology that's related to fighting. Like I'm going to attack this or attack that. I'm going to apply force here. I'm going to use this strategy and that tactic. I use combat terminology when I'm flint knapping because of the basic idea that I am fighting with the material. Same philosophy of combat applies to the philosophy of flint knapping. If you study strategy, I'm not good at direct quotes from books. I'll mess up a direct quote, but I think you get the idea. You know, the strikes that I do are aggressive. When you're fighting, you know, aggressiveness is a vital component. You don't always present an aggressive attitude. Of course, the stone doesn't know what you're doing, right? It's inanimate. It's an inanimate object, so you don't need to play mind games with it. But with yourself, as you're knapping, if you have a calm yet aggressive manner, you are going to achieve better results. If you attack it with an angry posture, you may interrupt your muscle memory, and it may be overpowered with your emotion. And you'll lose that muscle memory. You'll want to say, I'll just screw it, and I'm going to just do what I feel I should be doing to release my tension. And that's not how you want to approach this. Unless you are already at the stage where you broke it and you want to pulverize it into a little pile of powder. Well, then it's fine. But if you want to thin it down, I'm just taking little opportunistic flakes here and there. I don't need to thin it much more than this now. According to the artifacts, these are fairly thick. So unless I want to do just a few more bold flakes, I don't have to worry about the thinness anymore. Now, is that a strategy to thin it down in the beginning and then just trim around the edges? Yes, that is a strategy, and that was a strategy back in the day. When they talk about a flattened cross section, there's Kevin. You want to thin it first and then knap around the edges, and probably with some sort of bevel, and you'll have a flattened cross section with beveled edges, or light retouch, or what they call light retouch, I guess, where it's not heavy pressure flaking that intrudes into the metal. It's just around the edges. Yeah, that's a strategy. Also, the other strategy is just to do the opposite. Trim around the edges first, leave it really thick and fat, and then bold flakes toward the end to get rid of the turtle backs and lumpy spots and all the other stuff, and then you'll go back and do the final finishing. So there's various strategies, and you can get good at spotting which ones were used on these artifacts once you gain experience. And once you realize certain things, you'll see that, well, most artifacts, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say most artifacts have a variety of different ways that they were made over time. it wasn't always the same. Some were also napped by more skillful nappers than others. So just because one looks like it was flattened first and then trimmed around the edges doesn't mean that it was made that way. It could have been a very fat preform trimmed around the edges first and then bold flakes to get it thin toward the later stages and then final trimming. It didn't have to be like what I'm doing is thinning in the very beginning right off the bat and then going back and picking at different areas that are bulky. Okay. Yeah, the danger with this, if I'm not careful, is the step fracturing. Of course, back in the day, the step fracturing was present on many artifacts. So you don't have to get rid of it all. It's just nice. It just looks nice if you do. Okay. I'm going to assume that the Cotaco Creek was thinned at the base. I just took too much off, right? 1.5 centimeters wide. Okay, I still got plenty of room. I think their bases are rounded. No, they're squared off. So I'm going to lose a little bit more length. 60. It's going to get low. It's going to get shorter than that. Okay, anyway. We'll just pretend it's a resharpened version or something. So if you want to use this strategy, I just kind of thinned it first. And now I'm being picky about cosmetic flaking to make it look nice for the video. Trying not to get it too thin so that the look is consistent with the artifacts. You want it to, resemble an artifact. Even if it might not be an exact copy, it doesn't matter. As long as you get the overall look. At least that's my philosophy. Okay. I am very particular about the measurements, right? I do get particular about exact measurements because if I'm not particular about those, I end up being way off. That's just me. I'll go by memory and I'll be way off. Some people can remember numbers. I have a difficult time. So I always refer to notes or go back and make corrections later. But I have to have some sort of reference. And I learned over time that if I have a reference that's not my brain, I do much better. Okay. So I can clean up some of those cosmetic errors once I get down to the final stage. All right. I gotta sew up the tips of these gloves. I am gonna do it this time. Normally I just don't bother with it. I'll just get another pair. But it adds up. The price of these gloves add up over time. So I think I'll take some time and sew these up. In fact, I like these. I had washed these a couple times, so they feel pretty good. When you wash them, you just dry them partially and you put them on your hands and it'll stretch them out to your hand size. And then you put them aside to dry fully. And and they fit your hand much better than when you first buy them. I was just asked, how do I knap with gloves on? It's almost impossible for some people. Yeah, I didn't like to in the beginning either. But I can feel a lot of the effects of the knapping through the flaker itself nowadays. More in tune with the forces, right? More sensitive to what's going on. I can feel the flaking through the flaker itself and not really necessarily through the hand. Although if I took the gloves off, I can feel it through my hand much better. Well, I don't know about much better, but I can feel it. Some guys will mess themselves up if they cannot feel what's going on. And I understand that perfectly fine. Some guys use a leather pad in their hand instead of having a full glove. Whatever is good for you is fine. Now, do I recommend pads for supporting flakes? For you who are just tuning in, maybe you have come over from the dark side and wondering about pad support. Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question to answer, and this is why. You can use a tool in such a way that it behaves the way you want it to behave. Let's see, how do I explain this? If you want the pad to produce support for your flakes, you will engage in activities and muscle memory and methods that help the flakes travel with the pad. You will develop that. If that's your goal, everything will be focused in that direction. If you have that preconceived idea that these pads are going to help me support these flakes, that's what's going to happen over time. You will develop a technique that allows a pad to support the flakes. Does that mean that pads support flakes? No. That means that you have developed a technique that allows the pad to support the flakes. It's very different. So I consider that the dark side. When you think that you have discovered something, when instead all you're doing is you're making it happen, you're on a dark side. So you come over to this side. I'm not saying it's the side of good or the light. You come over to this side, I'm going to say it, well, it's a hard question to answer because you may have already developed the skill to do it. And if I say no, pads do not support flakes, you're going to go, well, look, my experience, these flakes have traveled extremely well with my pads that I have. And I've been doing it for many years, and no one can tell me that they don't work. Okay, well, I'm not going to tell you that they don't work. I'm just going to tell you that the pad itself is not it. Just because you have a pad doesn't mean that they travel well, that the flakes travel well. There's some guys that never get the flakes to travel well on a pad. They just, for some reason, hate it, and they have to flake on a different kind of pad that you got, something harder or something softer or not much at all, or they switch over to completely do it with indirect percussion without any pads. All right, so that's my take on it, if you're just tuning in. And I think, well, I don't know, I take it for granted that people will pick up from my videos things that I don't explain. I take it for granted that the actual knapping is explaining things, but I guess it isn't, because I get a lot of requests to narrate. And it surprises me sometimes. because I figure, well, I'm showing you very difficult view here for me to do this view for you to show you exactly what's going on as far as I can tell. I mean, you can't see it from the front. When you're napping, you can't see it from the front either. So why would you want to see it from the front when that's not how you're napping? You know what I mean? It's so silly sometimes. But anyway, people do want to see it, the angles from the front and all that stuff. That's fine. I apologize if it sounds condescending or making fun of you. No. I just think it's funny, you know. I can't learn by watching someone from the front. I learn by watching from what they are seeing. What are they seeing? That's what I want to know. How are they building their little platforms? I want to see it from their view. How are they striking these things? I mean, I need to imitate the same way, you know, monkey see, monkey do. It's the simplest way to learn. In order for monkey to do, monkey has to see. I got to see what they're doing from their perspective. Okay, enough of that. For you guys who are falling asleep, go back to sleep. I don't hear much traffic noises tonight, which is good. Not that it distracts me, but I really don't enjoy traffic noises. Okay, so I'm going to, the base, the stem is long enough now because it's like a centimeter long. These have short stems. I can take it in. I'm good on width. I'm just not quite there on the length. I'm probably about, 7 or 8 millimeters short on the length that I would like. But I'm sure they had this profile. Okay, so the rest of this can be done with pressure, except maybe thinning the base down just a little bit because there's a big old lump there. And for you that have just tuned in, I use a slotted hypothetical average at ladle dart 4-shaft to test all these stems and bases and all that for proper thickness, just like if I was trying to make an ladle dart. Okay. And this is obviously way too thick for this particular arrangement. I'm not saying that they were all like this. I'm just saying this is what I'm using. I won't get into the archaeological record as far as these go. There's not very many that survive. I just go by the averages that I use. Okay. All right. So I find it more effective to thin with percussion, with indirect percussion, than thinning with pressure, especially turtle backs and stuff and lumps. Indirect percussion is excellent for thinning these lumps down if I can get the flake to travel. Now that one hit the lump. That did not travel. And I'm not going to be able to hit from the very base because I don't want to lose any length. So I'm going to try to hit from the sides. Now, with that strike, you need experience to do that so you know where the edges of the flake are going to go. And I wanted the edges of the flake to stay within bounds, but still capture that step fracture that stopped right before that lump, and that thin down this stem. Still not quite there. We're getting close. I got plenty of opportunities to hit it elsewhere. Now, it may look easy, right? After a while, it kind of does get easy, but I always run the risk of breaking it. It is like a sport. There's an element of risk. You don't always hit the baseball with the bat. You don't always get the ball within the hoop. You don't always have a successful swing or toss or attempt at making the goal or whatever. Okay. All you can do is prep. Prepare yourself. Do it over and over and over and over. Eventually, it becomes easier and easier. Until you can start. Once it gets sufficiently easy, you can start controlling the flakes to make things look the way you want them to look. Does that mean experienced knappers can actually fake artifacts? Yes, of course. You can get good enough to fake artifacts, right? No one wants to talk about that. But yeah. And we get a lot of criticism from that perspective. Flintknappers don't get much criticism except in the area of manufacturing counterfeits. And the kind of criticisms we get on that are, you know, why don't you just do stuff that is not in the archaeological record? You don't have to do Native American stuff or rare items that are worth thousands of dollars and as real artifacts. Why would you even want to mess around with that? Well, a lot of us have Native American heritage. I found out I had more than I thought I did. That's one aspect. Another aspect is they are really cool. They're awesome. Another is it's quite a rewarding thing to actually have something that looks like an artifact, even if you cannot buy one. I mean, even if you don't have any money at all, you can make something that looks like something that costs literally thousands of dollars if you wanted to have a real one. I'm not saying that this particular type runs in that category, but there are categories like that. So there are various reasons. Some people believe we should not disturb any of the artifacts and just leave them in place. So if we want any, we have to make our own. There's that position as well. There's various ethical positions in this business. And I know a lot of knappers don't discuss those. I don't discuss it very often. But they are there, and sometimes you'll get resistance. It's not really a major thing unless you are intentionally trying to fool people. I get people in the comment section sometimes, well, why don't you just, you know, you can fool and play tricks on people by planting lookalikes in their yard and stuff, and they get all excited and maybe they want to dig some more and they end up digging up their whole yard because you faked them out with something that looked like an artifact that you put in their yard, and you think it's funny. Well, for one, that's a funny thing to do. As far, not funny, haha, funny, weird. If that's your sense of humor, you have a weird sense of humor. But also, it's It gives people a bad name. I mean, it gives hobbyists a bad name, because then someone can say, well, some of you hobbyists are actually, pranksters. You should, shame those pranksters within your ranks and make sure you don't have any people like that, and discourage them at every opportunity. Do you disavow the pranksters? Blah, blah, blah. If you're not disavowing the pranksters, then you're one of them and you're contributing to the problem, and blah. You get stuff like that, but it's rare. Most people understand how hobbies are. Go harass the basket makers that make exact duplicates of ancient baskets. Oh, no, that's different. Okay. Whatever you say. Alrighty. So, I think I should have done more research. Let's see. Yeah, finely serrated, sometimes beveled. So I guess I'm gonna put little serrations on this. I'm not gonna bevel this one. Now, is there a secret to these serrations? Well, the only secret that I can think of is just to make sure that they're sharp. It's very easy to put serrations in that are dull. If you're just looking at aesthetics, it's easy to put in serrations that are dull. Just do the pop outs in between each one with a clean pop out, and you should get a sharp edge. Now, this edge is kind of, it's not very straight, so it's hard to put serrations all the way down without losing too much of the edge. So the serrations are not perfect on this one. And I don't think they're perfect on the real ones either. Nothing really is on the real ones. And, it kind of goes hand in hand with the mindset back then. If they didn't think it needed to be perfect, then why should we? As long as it worked, right? As long as the shape, the way it's hafted, and the fit into the weapon system was good, according to their mental template. I'm a very strong believer in mental templates and preconceived ideas and technologies that exist in the mind first before you put them into practice. I believe that some of the technologies come straight from the mind. Someone gets a bright idea, they do a thought experiment, and they go, well, if I did it this way, if I shorten the stem, I don't need to notch the foreshaft as much. That would save time there. And also, it wouldn't break off as easy. It might twist in the half, but it won't break off as easy as if it was long. I'm tired of, actually, let's say this is an example. They may be tired of redoing the stems that break off halfway. And they say, well, just leave it short and it'd be better. That kind of thing. It starts off in the mind, I think, in a lot of cases, and it translates into the finished point. I mean, the point doesn't care where it snaps. I'm sure it still penetrates well, even though it might snap at the base. It's just the subsequent pain in the butt to change it out goes into your thought experiment, and you say, well, I need to fix it so that it's more convenient for me. can't remember if these are straight or they're angled upward. I think I saw these angling upward. And this will also give me a chance to get rid of that step fracture if I am able to take a little bit more off this edge, and I can push off another pressure flake to get rid of that step fracture, just so it looks better. I made a mistake there. Now let's see if I grind it. I don't think the stems were ground on these, right? Let me just take some time to straighten out that stem. Maybe one or two thinning flakes from the base. Shouldn't lose too much length on that. Just want to take this one thinning flake there. Okay, so get back to this one here. I wish I had an actual example of one of these, but I don't. Well, I might have one, a resharpened one that I got from a friend of mine. But a lot of these that are all you have on the artifact is the stem. It could be many different types of artifacts, not just this particular type. A lot of artifacts have the same kind of stems. Because the hafting technology is basically the same. They just change the blade for whatever reason. Some types are very symmetrical and some are not. Some point styles. I don't know if this is a style that's symmetrical. I think it is. But I don't need to do too much more on this. If anything. I could thin it down some more. Could make it more narrow, but I think these are wide points, right? They could also be knives too. It could be a big old knife handle like that. You never know. It could be hafted into big old knife handles, and the stem can be deceiving. It doesn't need to be as wide as the handle, you know. Some of these are socketed into bone. That's also a possibility. Or some of these can be socketed into bone. All right, so I think that's it. All right, it's pretty straightforward. I don't know how big the serrations are on these. I only saw a couple in the photographs that had serrations. And by big, I mean, what are the scoop outs like? Are they drastic scoop outs when they do the pressure flaking, or they're just minute little scoop outs? Is it irregular or extremely regular, or somewhere in between? Do they leave thick spots near the edge, or is it all thin? Is it kind of a random approach? Or, yes, all of those, all of the above, because different knappers do their points differently. I think they're just minute serrations and not a big deal. And I think it's a random pattern. I think most of the flaking is random, as far as I saw on the description. Yeah, I use mainly projectilepoints.net for points that I'm not familiar with. That's the fastest reference. That's just the lazy way for me to do it. If I want to do a lot more research, I'll go into the Noel Justice books, or specifically into that point style, into research papers put out by universities, or something like academia.net or academia.com. I can't remember. I have a subscription to Academia. They put out research papers. Okay, so I'll stop. I think that's how they were. The stems were almost straight, kind of short. I might even have gone too narrow. Let's see. Hopefully I didn't take too much off the sides. Yeah, this is still 15 millimeters. What did I have here? 16, 10. Yes, finely serrated. Yeah, no, they might have edges that are straighter than this. If they do, I apologize. I'm not sure if these barbs are flat bottomed or to go up or down. I think they are flat to upward. Okay. That's it.